So welcome to today's video where we're going to be discussing the people-pleasing part of us. So this is the season of the major personality parts driving your life. And this is the part that pleases people. Now, there are various reasons why we do this. So, for instance, we might do it to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. Often it's to, in some way, protect ourselves or allow us to survive or cope. So often we're trying to avoid conflict so that obviously everything is kept nice and calm. It might be that we are trying to avoid hurting others, that they are going to be offended in some way if we say something, like if we say no to going to their birthday party or going out for the night with them, rather than actually just being honest that perhaps we're too tired or it's just not our kind of thing, and that's okay. So we're listening more to them than we are to ourselves, for instance. It might be for an easier life, so that there isn't any arguments, or again, we're avoiding the hurt or the confrontation, for instance. Sometimes we do it because we want to belong, we want to fit in, So often when people do it for that reason, they may well have the belief I'm excluded or I'm an outsider or I don't belong, I don't fit in, that is kind of driving that behavior. So they're wanting to try and fit in when perhaps they're feeling pushed out or they're feeling rejected in some way or not liked. So that can come into it too, that we people please to be liked, to be approved of. Okay. It might be that we people please to avoid being rejected or abandoned. So people are having people that do that will have a fear of rejection or abandonment. And again, there will be something underneath that. That fear that's come from somewhere. All of these reasons we're people pleasing are going to be coming from somewhere that has happened in our life. Very often adverse childhood experiences, for instance. But sometimes that it can even go back into past lives, for instance, or ancestral energy as well can also link in with this. So external validation is another one where we're wanting to be validated by something outside of ourselves. So if we don't, if we're not trusting ourselves, and we're not, we're wanting to fit in, then we're going to be looking for that external validation. So I'll just say yes because everyone else is saying yes, and so on. So that's kind of linked in with the, I'm an outsider, I don't belong. It might be that we're doing it to actually stop feeling the atmosphere. Now, if you are very highly sensitive, very empathic, empaths are very tuned into the environment around them. And that includes, the emotions that are around them, within the people that are there, or even pets that are there. But generally, we do this with people more than anything. So in order to stop feeling those feelings, for instance, we will then people please to try and keep the peace and resolve the situation. So this can happen quite a lot, for instance, if somebody maybe has a very strong, intense, like more negative or lower vibrational emotions. So maybe anger is quite a good one to use. So if somebody is angry at you, you may want to kind of just people please or appease, to make sure that that anger kind of dissipates and goes away. Now, to give you an example, I had somebody around me. I was in their car. They were driving along, and I asked them to slow down. Now, I didn't say why. I just said, would you mind slowing down a little bit, please? And when the car stopped and we got out the car, I could feel, I'm very empathic and highly sensitive, I could feel a mile off that this person was angry. It was kind of oozing out of them. And I remember saying to them, it was a very gentle kind of starting point, are you okay? And yeah, they replied and said, yeah, I'm fine. And it was like, okay, I can feel you're not fine. So that was my next response is, well, I can feel you're not fine. To me, it feels like you're angry. It's okay to tell me if you're angry. Just don't vent it at me, but it's okay to say, I feel angry because. And it actually was a beautiful experience in that it allowed me to be able to say that to them, and honor obviously what I was picking up, but also it was honoring how they were feeling and saying it's okay to tell me, it's okay to talk to me about your feelings and share, what has been making you feel angry, because that's the way we start to resolve this. And as it turns out, they felt like I was criticizing their driving. And actually it wasn't. It was just that we were in a car that was very low to the ground, and that in itself didn't feel safe to me because of the vibrations that I could feel. And you know, they weren't going over speed, so it wasn't anything to do with that. So once I'd explained that and actually said it wasn't anything to do with their driving, it all, you know, dissipated. Their anger just went away because there was nothing to be angry about, because I wasn't criticizing their driving. So it was very good for me to be able to practice that assertiveness, but also for them, as I say, to be able to honor their feelings and me honor their feelings, you know, knowing that they've been triggered in some way. And that's their trigger, that's their responsibility. But I was kind of helping them to understand that trigger and share that trigger in a safe space. And, you know, it definitely did help communications moving forwards because of that. So you might do you might do the first part of it where you're feeling the feelings, but then instead of doing what I did with the assertive communications, you go into people pleasing with that person. To try and dissipate the anger that way. Whereas when you start to learn assertiveness and assertive communication, you can respond differently. You know, as I've said many times before, you know, awareness is empowerment. So if you become aware that you're people pleasing, and then actually that empowers you to learn assertiveness and communicate differently, you know, that actually they may have been triggered and it's their trigger to own that. Of course it is, but we can have that healthy conversation. Then you respond differently. You're communicating differently rather than people pleasing. Now, the other thing that we might do, the other reason we might people please, for instance, is lack of worth. You know, that our thoughts, feelings are as important as anybody else's, that we are as important as anybody else. If we don't believe that, then we're going to be like, well, I'm just going to say yes because my opinion's not important. You know, what my needs aren't important. And quite often people that people please, if they, you know, are really strongly into that, they won't even realize necessarily that they've got needs to listen to. And certainly for me, that was a really big one. You know, that was a really big one to understand, that actually I have needs and it's okay for me to listen to them, you know, as well as considering other people's needs. So, you know, all of those can come into it. Not believing that you have any rights. So a right to respect, for instance, could be one. You know, not believing you have any rights might be why you then people please. You know, rather than actually standing your ground, being assertive, or that you have any needs, as we've just said, or that it's okay to listen to your own needs, even if you realize you have them. So it's about understanding that, yes, you know, we all have our own needs. It's okay to listen to those and to respond accordingly. Now, there are times, yes, when you know, we may need to consider everyone's needs within the equation. It might be that there are times where, and I'll share that later on, where actually other people's needs might come first because of the situation, and it's contextual. So there's flexibility with this. Now, how do we people please? I mean, if you people please, you'll probably know kind of how you tend to people please, but often it's things like we will agree with other people's opinions, or we just won't say anything that goes against the grain. We won't share a different perspective or how we feel and think about something. You know, it might be that we're keeping somebody happy. It might be we're appeasing people. It might be that we're going along with things, as I say. It might be that you say phrases such as, when perhaps you're organising something with somebody or more than someone, you know, oh, I don't mind, you know, I'll just go with everybody else, you know, whatever everybody else wants or whatever you want. You know, we're not considering ourselves in the equation and taking that in, and often that will be down to that lack of worthiness of I'm not as important as anybody else, or I'm insignificant, or you know, that kind of thing. It might be that people pleasing, you're often doing it for, as I say, to keep safe, you know, to survive in some way. Very often this stems from childhood. As I say, we've done it to survive a situation or protect ourselves in some way, to keep the peace, to avoid, you know, mom or dad, you know, having an explosion of emotions. So we're just going to people please, and then that way it appeases them, and we don't have to deal with that. We don't, you know, or I don't get hit, or, you know, whatever it is. So safety, a coping mechanism, survival is often the underlying aspect of people pleasing. It happens a lot with people that have had a lot of, that have had childhood trauma, okay, or adverse childhood experiences, whichever way you want to say it, okay. Because of pleasing, people will often have beliefs, because they're not being themselves, but because they're kind of pleasing everyone else, it's all about others in a sense. They might have beliefs like, I'm a liar, I'm a fraud, I feel like an imposter, because they're not being themselves. They're not being authentic. So they might feel, guilty about that. They might feel shame. If it's more of an identity, we feel shame. Whereas if it's a behavior, we normally feel guilt. So they might have, as I say, beliefs around their identity. So I'm a liar, I'm a fraud, I'm an imposter. Or it might be more of a case of, if it's to do with fear, i.e. something is not safe, then they might have beliefs like, it is not safe for me to speak out. It's not safe for me to express myself. It's not safe for me to be me. It's not safe for me to, share my feelings with this particular person. If it's to do with worth, then like I said earlier, it might be things like, I come last, I'm not important, everyone else comes first, I am second best, I am last, I am nothing, I am insignificant, I am unimportant. Now, if any of those have created an emotional response within you, then it's very likely that you have one or more of those. So whatever one it was that I said that triggered that, then it may well be that you have that residing inside of you, okay? So the other thing with when we people please, so think about this, when we are, pleasing other people, often remember we are a sum of all of the different parts of ourselves. We've got the loving part, the protective part, the assertive part, the people pleasing part, the confident part, the shy part, and so on, okay? When you are people pleasing, there will be other parts of your psyche, of your personality, that are angry and resentful at the fact that you are people pleasing. Okay, sometimes they don't always understand the reasons why you're doing it. Okay, so sometimes that could be helped if it's for like a safety reason, or lack of, basically having an explanation as to why you're doing it. Okay. But quite often what will also happen is we will be resentful towards the person that perhaps has been asking for our help, or that we've been people pleasing, when really we're projecting onto them, and actually we're resentful at ourselves that we keep doing this. Okay, it's like, why do you keep people pleasing? For the love of, we've got things to do, we need to sort this out, and we're not getting any of that stuff done. It's that kind of interaction that's going on. Okay, so you've got the part that's people pleasing, and a part of you that's angry that you are people pleasing and resentful, because a lot of people that will people please quite strongly, are not getting time for themselves. They're not being able to listen to themselves or think for themselves. It's, I need to help this person, I've got to help them, and I've been volunteer for this, and I said that I would go and do that for them, so I'm going to go and do that, and then it's like, yeah, but what about your washing up? What about, you're going to go out for a walk today, you're going to go to the seaside, and now you're not going to do that because you're going to see them. So can you see how then there's inner conflict going on of the parts of you that want to do things for you and listen to your needs, and then obviously there's a part of you that's doing the people pleasing. So what often happens is we are effectively betraying our own truth, our own feelings, our own needs, for one of the reasons that we people please. So maybe keeping safe, might think that we're going to, offend people if we say no, or, oh, they really need me. Well, quite often, if that's something that you've said, very often, if you say no to somebody, they will just go and find somebody else that can help them. Not always, I know, but most often they will find somebody else that can help them. So try not to think that you are the only person they can depend on, unless you absolutely know that 100%. Okay, because it's not always the case. We think that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that is actually the case. Okay. The other thing is when you are people pleasing, there is, of course, a part of you that wants to be authentic, that wants to be the real you, that wants to be able to share, express itself, its feelings, its thoughts, its perspectives, its ideas, its creativity, whatever it is. And very often that part of you will be feeling sad and will just be crying out, to be able to express itself, in a obviously healthy expression. But it will feel sad, because it's not able to that. It's not, I'm not allowed to be me. So that can also come into this permission. I'm allowed to be me. Because actually in childhood, if you weren't allowed to be you, that's very often where that can come from. I'm not allowed to be me. But, as I say to people when I work with parts therapy a lot, this served you as a child. Maybe it kept you safe. It allowed you to survive. It allowed you to cope with whatever was going on. But now it's not working for you in adulthood. That's where we set the intention to change this, to release this belief, to work with this belief. Okay. Now, the other thing is that, it may well be, for instance, if it relates to, say, self-care, because it can do, okay, it may well be that part of you that would instigate self-care, you were called selfish when you were younger, and therefore you've disowned that part of you. Okay, so you're not going to be called selfish. So it's like, I'll just be there for other people because that way I don't get called selfish. When actually, selfish very often can be confused with self-care, with looking after yourself. Okay, and your needs. So it's important to remember that, okay, that if you were, for instance, called selfish, I am selfish if I consider myself. No, actually, if you're in an interaction with other people, absolutely, and we do have to consider the impact of our, of our behaviours, for instance, what we do, what we say, how we say it. We have to consider other people's needs, for instance, if we're in an interaction where everybody needs to be considered. Okay, but it's not selfish to care for yourself, to look after yourself. So just remember that as well. Okay, so some of this is tips and some of this is kind of intertwined with education. So there, as I say, that it may well be that there is a fear of rejection and abandonment underneath this people pleasing that's stopping us from expressing our truth, our essence, how we think, how we feel, what's important to us. That's to do with the values and boundaries, and one of the tips I give later on, but I'm just going to give it now anyway, is when you fear rejection or abandonment, the question I'd like you to ask is, how am I rejecting or abandoning myself in this situation if I people please? Because that often is the case, is we're abandoning our own truth, our own needs, what we feel, what we want to do, etc., to not be rejected by them. And again, that may be a perception. The fear might be there. It doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the case. And again, it can stem back to a childhood where perhaps when you haven't people pleased and you've been yourself and you've been in your authenticity, that actually someone has rejected you or abandoned you in some way, or perhaps you've been punished for it, etc. So again, just ask yourself that question, if I'm fearing rejection or abandonment and I'm going to go and people please because of it, where am I rejecting or abandoning myself in this situation if I do that? Or how am I? So when you are highly sensitive and you're very empathic, quite often, until you become more aware of it, quite often HSPs and empaths will people please. Now, a lot of this is because they're feeling energy, for starters. So as I said earlier, you will feel the energy in an environment. And what will happen is, say, for instance, if somebody's angry at you, like the example I shared, you're trying to people please so that anger goes away, it gets dissipated, and then that person is happy with you again. So again, it's also, I'm not being rejected by them. I'm not being disliked by them. I can't stand being disliked. I'm being liked by them again. So all's well in the world. Okay. But also, it can be that actually sometimes when we're not protecting ourselves, of course, we're taking on those feelings, and we can create group bonds with people and often feel very responsible for their behaviours and their feelings. And the thing to remember is Only you are responsible for your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior. That's all you can control. You are not responsible for anyone else's, okay? So just bear that in mind, okay? That if don't people please because you're trying to be responsible for their behaviors or their thoughts or whatever, which is what I could have done in that situation with that person in the car. I could have people pleased, and become responsible for their trigger, but actually I'm not responsible for their trigger. But yes, being a therapist helps because obviously I could kind of work through that in my own mind, go, okay, they've been triggered in some way, so let's talk to them about that and let's see if we can help. But I'm not being responsible for that. I'm just responding in a different way and communicating with them assertively. So just be aware that if you're very highly sensitive and empathic, very often you feel responsible for other people's behaviors because often that's happened in childhood as well. Okay, and just remember that you are not responsible for other people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Okay. When somebody is like pleasing at the high end, if you like, a very strong people pleaser, as I said earlier, really, they don't have any time for themselves. It's all about others. They're not listening to themselves. They're not listening to their needs. Sometimes they're not even realizing that they have needs. And what they will do is they will ignore their own needs, as I said earlier, because when we believe that we are second best, we are last, or we're nothing, or we're insignificant, or we're not important, then we're not going to consider our own needs. We're going to consider other people's because we deem them more important. We deem them, in a sense, superior and ourselves inferior or nothing. Okay. Extreme people pleasing is what we call a fawn response. So in the stress response, you've got fight, you've got flight, you've got freeze, and you've got fawning. So it's one of the 4 stress responses. And very often it's linked to trauma. And very often it is linked to keeping ourselves safe in some way. So it might be, for instance, that you received love as a child if you pleased somebody, if you fitted in, if you appeased them. They made you feel special when you did what they wanted you to do, or you were how they wanted you to be. So maybe as a little girl, you had long hair and you were super feminine because that's what your mum or dad wanted. So it's like, oh, that way I fit in and I'm pleasing them, but I'm not being me, for instance, and it might be that you feel like you're an absolute tomboy and you just want to get your hands, stuck in the mud and, that side of things. And you're not able to show that side because that doesn't please your parents or parent in some way. And so, of course, then you're learning, I'm not allowed to be me. I'm only allowed to be these aspects of me. So you kind of suppress the others, you disown them, you shut them down. Okay, so I hope this is all making sense. And it might be that if you didn't do the things that they wanted you to do, or you weren't the person they wanted you to be, that because of that you got punished or admonished or belittled or abandoned or rejected or humiliated or bullied or ridiculed, or dismissed for being different to what they wanted or what they wanted you to be. So just remember that. Okay, so now we're coming on more to the tips. Okay, there's plenty of tips here, so there's a lot to take on board with this one. And this is what I find sometimes. Some of the parts will be shorter than others, and some will be. So you might need to listen to this again and just take a bit more of this on board. So one of the things that you can do is, first, I'm going to ask you a question. Who do you love? Who do you love? Now, you're already probably starting to think about that. And what I want you to do is I want you to pause this video. I want you to list the people that you love. And then when you've done that, maybe up to 10, you might not have as many as that, but maybe up to 10, okay? And then I want you to come back to this video. So pause it if you haven't already. Go and list who you love and then come back to this video. So by this point, I'm hoping that you have paused the video, you've listed who you love, and you've come back here to hear why I've said this. So I want to say to you, where are you on that list? Now, if you've put yourself, near the top of the list, fantastic, great, that's good. If you weren't even on that list, consider why. Quite often it's because people believe they are, they're not significant, they're not important. If you were last on the list, often people have the belief of things like, I'm second best or I'm last, for instance. Were you an afterthought? Did you write everyone else down and you came in as an afterthought? Again, that's giving you information that most likely you are looking after everybody else, and then if you've got time, then you'll look after yourself. And I always use this analogy of the plane. You know, they always say, don't they, put your oxygen mask on first before you put that on your children. Okay. So I hope you found that exercise useful. The next thing is to learn assertiveness. Now, obviously, that's quite a big topic. It's not something I'm going to go into on this video, but I learned a lot about mine by reading Doreen Virtue's book, Assertiveness for Earth Angels, and also doing research just on Google, just on, the internet about what assertiveness is. And even just seeing it's like goodness, it's like an assertiveness meter, if you like. So you've got passive, and you've got assertive, you've got passive aggressive, and then you've got aggressive. Now, often people that have been passive will find that when they start being assertive, they think they're being aggressive. Now, quite often they're not, they're actually just being assertive, but it feels so out of the ordinary that they think they're being aggressive or they're being selfish, that kind of thing. And it's about getting that balance, it's to me, it's about, if I have to communicate to somebody, it's about communicating with love and respect, no matter what it is, trying to communicate with love and respect. Okay. So you can definitely learn more about assertiveness, and I suspect what I've just described to you, that little diagram, you will find somewhere when you're Googling assertiveness as well. The other thing that you can do is ask yourself the question, which is much easier to do than probably everything else I'm describing right now, is when somebody's asking something of you, is ask yourself the question, am I saying yes to them and no to myself? So to give you an example, somebody might say, oh, hiya, mate, I just wondered, are you available tomorrow to help me with the garden? Now if you're a people pleaser, you might go, thinking like, oh God, I was going to do this tomorrow and that tomorrow. Yeah, sure. Obviously, if you need my help, yeah. And they're like, oh, brilliant. Okay. All right. Well, how about 10? And they're thinking, oh, I'm quite tired actually. I was really hoping for a lie-in. Yeah, sure. 10. 10's fine. So what they're doing is they're being loyal to the other person's need, but they're not considering their own. So they are saying no to themselves and yes to the other person. So I know your next question is going to be like, well, how do we resolve that? How do we deal with that? So first of all, what you can do is say to yourself, well, what are my needs? What are my priorities? And remember, it's okay to listen to them. So I used to have an affirmation, well, I still do, but I don't use it as much now. But I used to have an affirmation, it is safe for me to listen to my own needs and respond accordingly. Excuse me, I'm getting a bit croaky. I'm just going to have a little drink. So you can say that affirmation to yourself. It is safe for me to listen to my own needs and respond accordingly before you give somebody an answer. So that's the first thing. You ask yourself, what are my needs? What are my priorities? How can we work with this? Now, it might be that if you feel a bit put on the spot, okay, and you want a bit of time to think about it, just say to somebody, let me think about that and I'll come back to you within 24 hours. Or let me think about that. Can I come back to you in an hour? Most people go, yeah, sure. That's not a problem. Great, let me know. Okay. It might be that the other question you can ask is, where is the middle ground? If you really want to help them, where is the middle ground? So in the example I've given, it might be that you say to them, oh, mate, actually 10 o'clock is a little bit early for me. I'm quite tired at the moment, so I was really hoping for a lay-in. Can we say 11 o'clock, or 11:30? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, of course, yeah, no, you have that lay-in. That's the other person honoring your needs and respecting that you have those needs and you've got that boundary as well. You're putting the boundary in place when you're saying that assertively to somebody, okay, that this is what I can do for you, and it's okay if you say yes and it's okay if you say no. Okay, So you can do that. It might be that you say to them, well, actually, I have got this to do for myself and I do need to get that done. So I tell you what, I can offer you the afternoon, or we could do the day after. I don't have anything on the day after, so I could do that then. You know, does that work for you? Now, it might be that they say yes, that's fantastic, or they might say no. And it's okay for them to say no. It's okay to say that that doesn't work for them, and therefore that they can, you know, go and ask somebody else for help. And I think pretty much every time I've put that in place, people have said, oh, okay, yeah, no worries at all. And I'll, you know, text them a few days later, or did you manage to get that sorted? Yeah, I asked so and so down the road. Actually, they came and helped me, and it was good because, you know, we haven't had a catch up for ages, so we had a right good laugh. So the thing is remembering that you are not always that go-to person. And again, if you have the belief I need to be needed, that also can come into this people pleasing a little bit as well. Of there's a bit of you that has a need met. I'm needed. And again, think about the opposite. So if you're not needed, what are you? Because then that's probably a limiting belief that you're holding about yourself. And that could be like, I'm useless, you know, I'm invisible, or whatever else it could be. So again, just look into that. So you can do the middle ground. You can say to people, let me think about that, you know, can I have 24 hours to think about that and I'll come back to you, or I'll let you know in a couple of days. But make sure you follow that through. Make sure that you don't, you know, give empty promises. Follow it through with somebody, let them know, so that, you know, then they're getting their needs met. They know exactly where you stand, and then they can look for extra help if they need, or whatever. You can do the middle ground, where actually you're meeting your need, and then saying, okay, so I can help you for 3 hours, but I can't help you all day. How about that? Because it might be then that they get a group of people together and you all get it done in those 3 hours. Okay, it might be that you say, absolute no, I'm really sorry. I've had somebody say that to me when I wanted some help, and they say, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm at X tomorrow, so I can't help. You know, I could do the day after. And I said, okay, is it right if I let you know? I'm going to see if I can get somebody else to help me. But if I can't, that would be fantastic. Thank you. And actually, I did get somebody to help me, but I still went back to them and said, thanks ever so much for your offer of help. I actually got it sorted. I got so and so to come round. So all done. But I really did appreciate you offering the day after. Because again, it's really nice to be acknowledged that you were offering help. You were offering what you could do. And, you know, that was considered. But you meant, you know, that the other person managed to get somebody else in the meantime. Okay. Becoming aware of why you're people pleasing. I mean, I probably should have put that at the top. Become aware of why you're people pleasing. Is it a genuine desire to, you know, to help somebody, you know, or are you doing it because of fears that you have, but limiting beliefs that you have? Is it, you know, the stress response? Is it down to trauma that you've experienced? Is it down to avoidance? You know, you're pleasing to avoid conflict, confrontation, you know, offending somebody, etc. Or are you doing it to keep safe, to protect yourself in some way? Understand also that your feelings are valid, okay? Your feelings are valid, your thoughts are valid, and your thoughts affect how you feel, that affect how you behave. So like I said earlier, if you've got the belief, for instance, that I'm not important, then you know, there's going to be feelings that come from that, and behaviors like people pleasing, because, well, I'm not important. You know, I have to please everybody else, you know. Understand that you have the right to say no outright, you know, no, thank you. And you don't need to justify it. You know, in most contexts, you do not need to justify it. Maybe if you're in a work environment or something, you might need to for a particular reason. But, you know, in general, no. If somebody asks, you know, do you want to go to the cinema tomorrow? Oh, no, thank you. You don't have to tell them why. Yes, you can say, oh, no, thank you, I've seen that film, or I just, you know, I've got stuff to do at home, or whatever it is. You can do, but you can just say no, and know that it is okay to listen to your own needs and respond accordingly. It might be that to stop people pleasing, you need to learn more about self-care, okay? Because as we said earlier, you know, that part of you that dealt with self-care may have been disowned, and you may have been called selfish. So, you know, that part's been disowned. And because it may well be that, you know, if you're not if you're not looking after yourself, so it kind of ties in with the loving part of us in that respect. If you're not looking after yourself, or you deem everybody else more important, you're going to people please. You're going to, say you were going to have a really, you've had a hard week and you wanted to have a lovely bath, with Epsom salts and candles around the bath and rose petals, and then somebody says, oh, could you come and help me with this? And you're saying yes to them and no to yourself, no to your own self-care. Empaths are well known for needing time to recharge on their own. So if you're then knowing that you need to recharge and you're then going out with other people because that's what they want, and they're pressuring you or you're pressuring yourself, you're not listening to your own needs. You're not looking after yourself of what you actually need, which is that quiet time or that walk in nature and just being by yourself. So learning about self-care can also help. Asking, yourself, or even thinking about this, if you people please, I'm asking you now, what are the downsides, the disadvantages of pleasing other people all the time? What do you lose? So I'm just going to give you a minute to think about that. What are the disadvantages of pleasing other people all the time? What do you lose? What are the disadvantages of saying yes to them and no to yourself? I mean, that's an answer in itself, I get that. But it's things like, you start to lose your identity if you're starting to just be the yes person. I'm just going to agree with them. I'm not going to share my opinion, for fear of judgment or ridicule, or in case they reject me, or, I'm not fitting in. You start to lose your identity, your true essence, who you really are. You're not listening to your needs, or you're losing your needs. You're not aware of your needs. Often, like when I started working on my people pleasing, I didn't even know I had needs, so I had lost them as such. They were still there, but I'd lost consciousness of them. You lose the quality time, that you might need for yourself when you're people pleasing, that time you need to get your own stuff done, and to please yourself. Okay, so this is about pleasing yourself as well. Okay, it may be that you start to listen more to others, more and more and more, to the point that you then you start mistrusting yourself. You lose yourself. You lose speaking your truth, being authentic, being honest. It's a betrayal of self. You're being loyal to them and disloyal to you. Okay, as I said, we start to lose happiness because we start to resent them. We start to resent ourselves because we keep doing this and getting angry with ourselves. We're meeting their needs versus our own needs. We're actually pushing our needs away and suppressing our own needs, and then getting stressed because actually all the housework's piling up and this needs doing and that needs doing, and I haven't had a chance to do it because I helped that person and I did this and I helped this charity and I did X and I volunteered at this, and you're not giving that time for yourself to meet your own needs. Not only that, you are depriving the world of all that is you, all of your gifts, your talents, your offerings, your knowledge, your wisdom, your uniqueness. That uniqueness of you is part of a collective consciousness that needs and wants to be expressed. So when we are fawning, when we are people pleasing and agreeing with other people and agreeing with their opinions, we're not being ourselves, so we're not expressing what is true to us. I used to not say certain things in front of certain people because of their uncomfortableness, shall we say, around spirituality and the unknown in terms of things like animal communication, angels and spirit. And now, I will generally say it, but I won't necessarily go deeply into it because I'm considering that actually that is not their belief. That is not what they know. They feel very awkward around it. They don't know how to discuss it, what questions to ask. They don't actually want to ask any questions or discuss it. So, I'm not people pleasing. I'm still speaking my truth, but I'm not diving right deep into it because they're not my person. They're not the person. They're not my tribe, if you like, to be able to share that with, and that's okay. I'm okay with that, because why am I going to do something that makes them feel awkward? Yes, okay, that's their stuff, if they're feeling awkward, but also I wouldn't want them ramming something down my throat that they're passionate about that they know I'm not. So it's also kind of that mutual respect of I will share it, because if they're asking me, what have you been up to this week, it's quite natural for me to say, oh, well, I had an animal communication client, or I had a healing client, it was really amazing this week, the angels sent me the smell of rose and I saw 777, like that is my week, where I've had those kind of experiences, but I'm not necessarily gonna dig deep and really get into that with them. But you're asking me how my week is, I'm going to share that. Okay. So the things is, when you are not being you, when you're not speaking your truth, you're depriving the world of you. And then what happens is, of course, you've got people around you who only know that false self, that fake sense of self that you are showing to the world. And actually, yes, what might happen is when you really are you, they start to fall away, and that's okay. It just means that again, they're not your people, they're not your tribe. And what will happen there is, as they fall away and you become more you, the people that actually love you for being, having, that personality, or, being that way, talking about spirituality or whatever it is, will come towards you, will, navigate towards you. And so then you will have new people come into your life, as those people that aren't kind of resonating with you anymore will leave. And that's quite natural, beginnings and endings. And I'm still on that journey of being me, very much so, but I'm sharing much more of myself with the world, and I'm okay with that. And actually, if someone doesn't get on with that, that's all right. That's where they're at, and that's okay. I want the people around me that like me for me, that listen to me for me, what I'm sharing, who I am, my values, my beliefs, everything that I can impart from my personal experiences, from my, working with clients, working with animals. I want people to accept the real me. I want those people around me. And the more you heal, the more you will do that, the more you will be authentic rather than people please. Okay. So as I touched on there, boundaries also comes into this as well. So working on your boundaries and what's important to you is also worth doing, as well as Googling things like self-respect or respect is a really good one I found when I was working with assertiveness as well. And finding out what the definition is and what it means to respect somebody, or what it means to respect yourself. All of that comes into it as well. One of the thinking types very often that people pleasers do is what we call mind reading. So it's where they are thinking that they know exactly what another person is thinking. And again, the way to look at that is understand that actually that may not be the case, so don't behave in a way that based on that belief, for instance. Okay. So there's difference in behaving in a way because you think you know what somebody's thinking, versus being around the right people who will happily hear your view, your insight, hear your feelings, and consider, your feelings, your thoughts, your needs. There's a big difference. Okay. So I've already given an example of assertiveness, where, as I said, going out, and they're agreeing to come back later, and actually arranging an earlier time or a different day or a shorter length of time for everyone, or maybe you go and then you come back halfway through or whatever. The other thing that also you can do, so say somebody is not behaving in a very respectful way towards you. So assertively, you can say to somebody, when you do X, I feel, so you're owning that feeling, X, okay? If you continue to do this is what will happen. So this is the consequence, okay? So it's a really good one in terms of assertiveness. So, for instance, when you shout at me, when you raise your voice at me, I feel really disrespected. If you continue to do this, I'm going to walk away. And I only want to speak to you when you're willing to speak to me at an appropriate volume. Okay, so can you see how that is very assertive? You're saying it with love, you're saying it with respect for the other person, but you are saying to them, I'm not going to people please, I'm not going to tolerate this. No, this is what's going to happen. This will be the consequence if you continue to do this. Okay, so that's also a good one to remember. Okay. So I did say earlier tonight where there might be times where you might deem other people's needs more important than yourself. And this would be things like an emergency. So it might be that, a member of your family, your daughter or your father rings up and says, I've just fallen down the stairs. Absolutely. Very likely I'll be straight over, so that might happen. Or it might be that, down to compassion, your elderly neighbour comes around and says, oh my goodness, my dog's vomiting and I don't know what to do and I haven't got a car and taxi's going to take too long. I'm really worried, and you might go, do you know what, it's okay, I've got free time, I'll take you myself, or it might be you say, oh my God, I've you might have something that you absolutely have to do, but that, your daughter's 2 houses up the road or something, I know she's at home, let me see if she can come and help you or whatever. So can you see how there can be that flexibility in those situations that, yes, absolutely, we might sometimes, it's contextual, we may well sometimes go, actually, I am going to put that person's needs above my own, partly because also it's like, do you treat people how you'd like to be treated yourself? In a sense, I would love it if somebody did that, if I was in that situation. And I'd be very grateful to them for that as well. So there are a few books out there on people pleasing. So if you do people please, again, that's a lovely starting point. One of them is called The Curse of Lovely by Jacqui Marson. I've got that book myself. It's one of the books I read when I was researching my own people pleasing. And another one is called Untamed, Stop Pleasing, Start Living by Glennon, Doyle. Okay, I'm sure there is plenty of others, but there's just a couple there, but feel free to obviously research and I'm sure you will find your own. So I'm going to leave you with this quote. I don't know the key to success, but the key to failure is trying to please everybody. And that was by Bill Cosby. So if you resonated with the content in this video, then why not click like on my social media channels or subscribe to my YouTube channels for updates and new episodes when they appear. Next time, we're going to be going into a wonderful tag team. So yes, we do have parts that tag team us. And the first one we're going to be discussing out of that tag team is the pusher part of us, which I will explain obviously a lot more next time. So until then, just remember, awareness is empowerment. If I am aware, then I am empowered to make change, to think, feel, and act differently. So until then, take care and bye for now.